Where there's something about lies, there's something about love, but most of all, there's something about Mary. Remember, when a summer comedy convinced a whole generation that winning someone back took a private investigator, a fake identity, and one very bad trip to the emergency room? That was There's Something About Mary. Fox dropped it in July of 1998, and the poster made it look like a completely ordinary romantic comedy. Guy, girl, a high school crush he never got over. Well, it's not that. A dorky prom date turns into a near 20-year obsession. The guy hires a private investigator to track her down, and that one decision unleashes every con artist, stalker, and human disaster currently orbiting her in Miami. Cameron Diaz plays Mary, the woman every man in this movie is willing to lie, fake an accent, or even fake a disability just to get near. Ben Stiller is Ted, still physically paying for a mistake he made at 17. Matt Dillon plays Healy, the private investigator who finds Mary and decides the professional move is keeping her for himself. Lee Evans rounds it out as Tucker, an architect who isn't really an architect. Isn't even close. Throw in Chris Elliott, W. Earl Brown, and Lynn Shay, and somehow this ensemble turned stalking into a team sport. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about There's Something About Mary. Stick around for number 1, how a 20-year-old magazine interview nearly cost the director an Oscar for a joke he had been telling on set the whole time. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. And please, for the love of God, make sure you have your own hair gel. Number 15. Hollywood mocked a British man for sounding too British. Lee Evans plays Tucker, a British architect who turns out to be none of those things. Not British, not an architect, not even named Tucker. He's Norm, an American pizza delivery guy running the most elaborate long con in Miami on a woman who thinks he's her friend. Now flip it inside out. The actor underneath all that fake identity is unmistakably English. Evans grew up on a council estate by the Bristol Docks, Welsh dad, Irish mom, and by 1998 he was one of the biggest comedians in Britain. His act was sweat-soaked physical comedy, part mime, part cardio. He would change suits mid-show because of what he'd do to the first one. The knock that followed him was that his accent in this movie is one of the worst fake British accents ever committed to film, which is a spectacular thing to accuse an actual British person of. He wasn't faking. He was just cranking his real voice up louder to fit a man who was faking everything else. The vindication came later. In 2009, he turned up on Dr. Who as a Welsh scientist, and nobody said a word. He retired from stand-up in 2014, having already set the world record for the biggest crowd ever assembled for a solo comedian, 10,000 people. The character lied about being British, but the actor never did. Somehow Hollywood mixed the two up anyway. Number 14. 3 football legends and 1 bad stage dive. Brett Favre was not the Farrellys' first choice to play Mary's football star ex. He wasn't the second either. He got the part because a Patriots quarterback jumped off a stage in Boston. November 13, 1997, Drew Bledsoe goes to see Everclear at the Paradise with 2 teammates, and at the end of the set, all 3 of them are launching into the crowd. A 23-year-old woman named Tamika Messier gets hurt badly enough to need surgery on her neck and spine. She sues. Bledsoe fights it. The papers eat it up. And it takes until 1999 to settle for a reported $1.2 million. The Farrellys were New England guys and they wanted Bledsoe, but he called and said no in the most Boston way imaginable. If this town finds out I flew to Miami to be in a comedy while all this is going on, they'll run me out of it. Next call was Steve Young, who told them it was the funniest script he had ever read and turned it down anyway because it was rated R and he knew Mormon kids would sneak in to see him. So they went to option 3. Brett Favre showed up with 3 straight MVPs and a Super Bowl ring, took one look at the lines written for him, and threw them out. He improvised the one about being in town to play the Dolphins, you dumbass, and they kept it. He's in the movie for maybe 90 seconds, and he's the only person in it who behaves like a normal human being. Years later, when the Farrellys told his story on the radio, Bledsoe called in and said missing that part was one of the biggest regrets of his life. 14 years in the NFL, a Super Bowl, and the thing that haunts him is a Farrelly Brothers movie. Number 13. The studio fought its own directors over the leading man. Fox did not want Ben Stiller. The Farrellys wanted nobody else. The studio's case wasn't crazy. Stiller had directed 2 movies, appeared in both, and neither made him a star. Nobody had ever asked him to carry a romantic comedy because nobody thought of him as exactly romantic. The Farrellys tried to solve the problem and made it dramatically worse. Their counteroffer was Owen Wilson, whose big credential was Bottle Rocket, a movie that grossed less than $1 million. Fox said Stiller isn't famous enough, and the Farrellys said fine. How about somebody nobody has ever heard of? Jon Stewart even got floated, still picking himself up after his talk show was canceled. He'd take over The Daily Show a couple of months after the movie opened, which is the closest anyone in this story comes to good timing. Fox looked at the alternatives, looked at Stiller, and quietly gave up. He didn't win the part on merit. He won it because the backups were, in their eyes, worse. Number 12. The best kiss in the movie wasn't in the script. For hours. That's how long Lynn Shay sat in the makeup chair every single day to become Magda, because the note from the Farrellys was that she needed to look like an old leather bag. She's out there under the Miami sun doing a dialogue scene with a dog in her lap. Peter Farrelly isn't feeling it, tells her to pick up the energy, and Shay's fix is to lift the dog over her head. The dog kissed her for real, enthusiastically and at length. Nobody wrote that. Slammer was a female border terrier who had bonded with Shay between takes, and she picked that exact moment to express it. Shay's read was that her job was to stay in the scene, so she did, fully committed, never once acknowledging what was happening to her face. Diaz was watching from off-camera and later described it as one of the funniest, most disgusting, disturbing things she had ever seen, which also works as a review of the film. Shay is the sister of the man who founded New Line Cinema. She's in basically every Farrelly movie ever made, and now she's the face of the Insidious franchise. Serious horror, real gravity. And she got there by making out with a terrier in a bikini. Number 11. The real accident they decided to keep. 18 minutes in, paramedics will Ted out of the Jensen house on a stretcher and drop him face first onto the pavement. Nobody wrote that. They actually dropped Ben Stiller. The take was supposed to be a straightforward wheel him out, and instead the crew put a movie star on the ground in front of everybody. They cut, ran over, made sure he still had a spine, and then realized it was funnier than anything on the page. So it stayed in exactly as it happened. First take, no rehearsal, no notes, no choreography. Meanwhile, at least 6 fake prop dogs covered the stunt work, so the movie could throw a dog, bite a dog, and fire a dog out of a second-story window without anyone explaining themselves to the Humane Society. 6 prop dogs, a custom prosthetic, weeks of testing, an entire department dedicated to engineering discomfort, and the biggest laugh of the first act cost them one bruised Ben Stiller in about 4 seconds. Number 10. One Kid's Worst Day became a comedy classic. The zipper scene is not a writer's room invention. It actually happened in the Farrelly house. Their sister had a bunch of 8th graders over, down in the basement playing records, and one of the boys goes upstairs to use the bathroom and does not come back. Long enough that their father, an actual doctor, the only lucky detail in this whole story, had to go knock and ask if the kid was all right in there. He wasn't. Here's the part that gets you. Their parents never told Peter and Bobby. Not that year, not the next. They sat on it on purpose to save the 13-year-old the humiliation, hiding it from the 2 people in the house least likely to keep it to themselves. It worked for years. Then it didn't. A movie that made nearly $400 million opens on the worst thing that ever happened to a kid whose name nobody has ever printed. Somewhere out there is a man in his 50s watching Ben Stiller do his night in front of the entire planet, and he's never once raised his hand. Number 9. The movie's grossest props went through serious R&D. Fox didn't want this scene shot. Not trimmed, not toned down, just not shot. The Farrellys pushed anyway, which meant somebody on the crew had a job: build the substance. The requirements were brutal. It had to read as disgusting in a tight close-up and plausible as styling product from across a room, because the entire joke collapses the second Mary would obviously know. Too runny, no gag. Too thick, no laugh. A props expert kept coming back with versions until one worked. 2 departments, weeks of work, a studio actively hoping they'd fail, and now those 2 things are the only things anyone remembers. Number 8. They shot a clean version in case nobody laughed. Cameron Diaz read the scene, said yes, and meant it. Then the day came, and she showed up different. Bobby Farrelly's guess was her manager, and the note was the obvious one. "What are you doing? This could end you." She was 25 and about to be a movie star. The Farrellys didn't argue, because they weren't sure either. Their promise was simple: if it doesn't get a huge laugh, it's gone. They weren't trying to gross anyone out, they were just trying to land a joke, and a joke that doesn't land is just a mess in a woman's hair. So they hedged, shooting a complete clean version with her hair perfectly normal. Somewhere in a Fox vault is a cut of this film where the biggest joke simply doesn't happen, and nobody has ever quoted a single line of it. Number 7. The high school is a city hall. Cumberland High School isn't a high school, and it isn't in Rhode Island. It's Plantation City Hall in Plantation, Florida, about 1,000 miles south of where the movie says it is. The city rented it for $2,500. When the reviews landed, the president of the Plantation City Council, a devoutly Catholic man who never actually watched the film, read enough to figure out what he'd sign the town up for. That building is where Plantation holds its Christmas lights display every December, wreaths and garland and gingerbread houses, and every family taking photos on that lawn is standing exactly where a teenager in braces spotted the girl who ruined his life. $2,500, no takebacks. Number 6. It beat Saving Private Ryan. At the 1999 MTV Movie Awards, the nominees for Best Movie were Armageddon, Shakespeare in Love, The Truman Show, Saving Private Ryan, and There's Something About Mary. You know how this ends. The Normandy landing lost to a movie about a man who gets his genitals caught in a zipper. 4 wins total, including Best Fight, which went not to Dillon versus Stiller, not Stiller versus Evans, but to Stiller getting beaten up by Puffy the Border Terrier. It beat Wesley Snipes cutting through a warehouse of vampires in Blade, and Antonio Banderas fencing Catherine Zeta-Jones in The Mask of Zorro. The award was handed out by Rose McGowan and Jon Stewart, who had come within one studio note of playing Ted. Slammer was not in attendance. Nobody sent her a video message either. Number 5. Nobody wrote the Chipmunks. Harland Williams is not in the credits, but he's in the movie for about 2 minutes and is the reason a generation of men can't hear the number 7 without flinching. He plays a hitchhiker Ted picks up on the drive south, a man with a business plan and no business having one. 7-minute abs is everywhere, so his idea is to cut a minute off. That's the pitch. That's the whole company. When Stiller asks the obvious question about what happens when someone shows up with 6, Williams leaves the atmosphere entirely. He estimates about half the scene came out of his mouth unscripted, doubling the length of what they had planned to shoot. The Farrellys kept every second. The most quoted minute in the movie was invented on the spot by a guy the movie never bothered to name. Number 4. He lost the job to Chris Farley, then inherited it. Warren is based on a real person, a guy the Farrellys grew up with on their street who was intellectually disabled, the older brother of one of their friends. Fox fought them on the whole character, but Peter Farrelly's answer was that people with disabilities exist, so put him on screen. The studio wanted a name, and everyone circled Chris Farley. The Farrellys' own argument against him was honest. No matter how good he was, the audience would just be watching Chris Farley. He was also uninsurable by then. He died December 18, 1997, while they were still shooting. The comics kept coming in, and at the callback Earl Brown was the only one in the room who wasn't a stand-up. He could hear the others through the wall doing the voice, pushing it, trying to make Warren funny, and he knew right then that all of them were wrong. He'd heard about the script from Lynn Shay at the gym, got a call made to Bobby, and 2 days later he was in the room. Here's what closes the circle. Back in Chicago a decade earlier, Brown had auditioned for a permanent spot at Second City and lost it to an unknown kid named Chris Farley. He didn't get the job the first time either. Number 3. A dedication almost nobody notices. You have to sit through everything to see it. All the credits, the whole cast singing Build Me Up Buttercup in the street, every name in the crew, and then after all of it, one card dedicated to the memory of Ryan Moan, West Tisbury, Massachusetts. Ryan Moan was 17, played hockey, was from Martha's Vineyard, and the Farrellys had known his family for years. He died in a car accident in 1998, about 6 months before the movie opened. So they put his name on it. All of it. The zipper, the gel, the dog, the whole beautiful mess. Most dedications go to a producer or a mentor. This kid had nothing to do with the film industry. He was just somebody they knew, and every single person who walked out during the credits missed it. Number 2. The man who sued this movie became the ShamWow guy. September 23, 1998. Mary is the biggest comedy in America, and a writer-director named Vince Offer sues Fox and the Farrellys for ripping off 14 scenes from his film The Underground Comedy Movie. Small problem, nobody had seen it. It wouldn't be released for another year. The Farrellys were in Europe and didn't even know they'd been sued. When they found out, their statement was that they had never heard of him, never heard of his movie, and the whole thing was a bunch of baloney, and they wished he'd go break into David Letterman's house and leave them alone. Offer had already written a demand into his own film's credits. Give me back the promotional copy of my movie you got in 1997. The judge dismissed it with prejudice and ordered him to pay Fox $66,000. He was bankrupt by 2002. To dig out, he went back to selling a vegetable chopper at flea markets and swap meets. That chopper is the slap chop. He had been selling it the whole time. He just needed to lose a lawsuit, lose a movie, and lose everything before somebody pointed a camera at him doing it. And number 1. The joke that followed Peter Farrelly for 20 years. January 2019, Peter Farrelly is holding a Golden Globe, not for a comedy about a dog getting launched out of a window, but for Green Book, a prestige drama about a black concert pianist touring the segregated South. 3 Globes, including Best Picture, and he's 3 weeks from an Oscar. But then a magazine called The Cut goes into the archives and finds a 1998 Newsweek profile published while Mary was becoming the biggest comedy in America. Peter's bit, the one he told a reporter he had done easily 500 times, was exposing himself. Bobby would set it up, point out a strange mark on his brother's torso to get you to look down. Cast, crew, a senior Fox executive, even Cameron Diaz in a restaurant before she signed on. Farrelly told a second reporter that year that the flash was precisely what got her to say yes. None of this was hidden. He said it on the record to 2 magazines while the movie was in theaters. Newsweek printed it as color. Diaz laughed it off in her own quotes. Nobody thought it was a story. But 20 years later, it was the only story. Farrelly's statement was 4 sentences. He was an idiot. He thought it was funny. It makes him cringe now. He's deeply sorry. 6 weeks after that, Green Book won Best Picture. The gag didn't change. The audience did. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about There's Something About Mary. Which one hit hardest for you? Tell us in the comments, subscribe right now, and send this to the one friend who still swears it's just styling gel. Until next time, how'd you get the beans above the frank? This is Remember When.